Greetings, Starfighters. Welcome to the penultimate episode of Season 1 of Shameless Cashgrab with the ultimate, and by ultimate I mean last, movie on the set. Eternal Evil from 1985, starring Winston Reckert, Karen Black, and Andrew Bednarski. I know who exactly one of those people are. So, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Who knows? Well, I will fairly shortly, and so will you.
All right, and I have now watched the final movie in the Strange Things set, 1985's Eternal Evil. But before I go into the movie itself, let me just go ahead and give you the plot summary courtesy of ye olde IMDb. A dissatisfied Montreal director of TV commercials is taught to astrally project himself by a mysterious woman. But soon he finds that he does it against his will when he sleeps, and while he does it, he commits savage acts against those in his life. As for the movie itself, we have moved on from the Italian knockoff, sadly, or thankfully, depending on how you look at it. Oh, and notice something about this poster for the movie? Gee, that child looks kind of familiar, don't he? Yes, that in fact is the child from the cover of the Strange Things set. Anyway, we get off to a rough start, as right off the bat, the film quality is about on par with that of Lurkers, and Lurkers had probably the worst film quality of any movie in the set. As you may recall, I quipped at the time that this transfer was probably taken off of a VHS copy. The music's pretty good, though. It has a sort of a quasi-Enya feel to it. Yes, I like Enya. Blow me. Anyway, the first couple of minutes consists just of the music, a brief close-up of a sleeping man's face, and the camera flying around the house and rotating and swinging at intervals. Swinging. I can talk. Not fast enough to make one dizzy, though, unless one is prone to seasickness, I suppose. As the camera pans over various people's sleeping forms, it becomes obvious that this is meant to represent our main character's astral projected self. This is nice camera work, by the way. I just wish I could see it without tracking lines and fuzz. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this one was ripped from an old VHS copy too, just like Lurkers. Come on, Mill Creek, I've seen footage from your Quantum Leap Blu-ray. I know you can do better. Anyway, this flying around continues until the astral projection, who we don't actually see, by the way, this is all POV, comes across a dog barking at it and a scared-looking guy. The music helps build tension, as it looks like something bad is about to happen to the scared-looking guy, until the sleeping guy gets woken up by his young son. Not gonna lie, as in media res openings go, I kinda like this. Honestly, the only negatives I have about this opening sequence has to do with the quality of the film transfer, and that's on Milk Creek, not on George Mihalka. I hope I pronounced that right. The director of this film, who also directed the cult horror classic My Bloody Valentine, by the way. So the guy who was sleeping on the couch, for some reason, puts the kid to bed, then he goes to bed himself where his wife was sleeping, and wakes her up getting in. Now, I'm neither married nor a parent, but even so, the brief conversation they have seems realistic to me. We go from that, rather awkwardly, to the set of a diaper commercial that our main character, sleeping on the couch guy, is working on, and it overlaps with the audio of him talking to someone, a psychiatrist, we find out later, about how dissatisfied he is with his job. A line he uses that I found rather effective is, "Every day they come up with new and better ways to wipe your ass while half the world is starving to death." I think I quote that line right. At this point, we learn our main character's name, Paul, and we also learn that he once made a film called Wandering Soul that apparently didn't do very well, hence why he's stuck doing diaper commercials. During the making of that film, he dabbled in researching astral projection. He then tells the shrinks that he met a woman, Janice, at one of his wife's cocktail parties, who got him back into it, and now he is doing it for real. Well, the audience knows that he's doing it for real, but the shrink is understandably skeptical about it. And then I get distracted from the conversation by an out-of-nowhere Mill Creek Entertainment watermark in the lower right-hand corner. I just... What? Why only this movie? Why any of the movies, but why this one? I know I should be listening to Paul here, but it's right there, and it wasn't in any of the other movies, and... What? Moving on. Paul leaves in a huff during what becomes an argument about the validity of astral projection, and Paul goes to work. He starts to drift off at his desk, and we see the camera going around the city, denoting he's in astral form again. We cut to his astral self, which can't be seen this time, apparently, as he knocks a book off a shelf to hit the psychiatrist on the head. But when the shrink looks up at the shelf, he doesn't seem to have any reaction beyond the fairly standard what-the-fuck face one would have if a book randomly fell off your shelf and hit you in the head. No explanation has been given yet to why the shrink can't see him, but the guy from earlier with the dog could, and was afraid of him, but it's early in the movie. There is such a thing as too soon to call something a plot hole. Try explaining that to a Star Trek Discovery hater sometime, though. You'll end up having to block them on Facebook inside of a day. Anyway, the shrink tries and fails to get into the elevator. It's one of those older buildings where, like, the door is like a grate and you slide it open. And if you've seen one of those older buildings, or if you've ever been in one of those older buildings, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And but anyway, suddenly the shrink can see the astral projection now. Or Dad already heard the soundtrack change, and now he's running scared down the stairs as the POV shot follows him. The shrink stops running because the astral projection then proceeds to pin him to the grating of the elevator shaft and kills him in a way I'm sure would have been mildly disturbing were I able to properly see it. Not sure if it's all on the film transfer this time, though. I could be wrong, but the scene looked pretty poorly lit to begin with. As soon as the shrink is dead, Paul wakes up, clears up his desk, and goes home where he is a dick to his wife, complaining about having chicken for dinner again, complaining about the smell of paint stripper. The wife, Jennifer, was working on a dresser, rudely dismissing her concerns about him keeping a gun in the den, just generally being a dick. Our hero, everyone. Shortly after this, we get a scene where their child, Matthew, wakes up in the middle of the night and goes downstairs to draw a picture he titles Blue Man. I bring this up because the Blue Man is the film's alternate title. Also, apparently Blue Man refers to what the astral projection looks like before it kills people. I say apparently because the child's drawing is all we get of it. We never see the astral projection itself. Now, I know this movie probably didn't have a huge budget, but I'm not sure if that counts as a creative way to get around a low budget, or if it's just lazy. I suppose it could be a combination of the two. Anyway, we jump from that to Paul and his family driving out to his father-in-law's farm, and then jump from that to the coroner and the cop investigating the death of Paul's shrink. We spent just enough time with them to know the cop's name is Stuart, and that's about it before we go back to Paul, who, as it turns out, used his astral projection, which he has not told his wife about, to learn that his father-in-law is selling his farm, something his wife doesn't know yet. Shortly after getting out of the car, the father-in-law's dog attacks Paul for no apparent reason. Well, in-universe, anyway. The dog knowing who the killer is before anyone else is horror movie cliché number 21B. 21A is cats. The son comically underreacts to seeing his beloved grandfather's dog, who he was hoping to play with, trying to kill his dad. He just stands there and looks. Not sure if that's better or worse than forced screaming, though. After Paul gets his arm stitched up, we jump again, this time to Paul in his office, while one of his co-workers is having a film-related disaster. As in physical film, not that he's watching a bad movie. No, that's my cross to bear since I decided to start doing this show. But one thing's for sure, it would be nice if this movie could stay in one place for more than 2 minutes. I'm trying to watch a movie, not a music video. I mean, let me set the stage for you. Here. In the space of less than a minute, I checked, we go from Paul asking a coworker how his weekend went, to the cop from earlier going through the dead shrink's office, which Paul's astral projection apparently decided to stick around and wreck the shit out of after killing him. The officer walks into the office and opens and closes a file cabinet drawer. That's it. He walks in, looks around, does that. Then we jump back to Paul and his coworker, and the coworker starts talking to Paul. I'm not even kidding. The movie literally cut away from Paul and his coworker to show us nothing of value to the story. I'm starting to see why this movie is not particularly well reviewed. An average score on IMDb of 1 3/4 stars out of 5. Anyway, the time frame of the movie gets confused, but honestly, given the jumpy editing, that's almost to be expected. Oh, and when we join our good detective in the dead shrink's office again, he's casually tossing a book over his shoulder while sitting at the doctor's desk, while the doctor's secretary is just outside the room. I can tell you that this guy is bad at his job, and my police experience consists of having watched way too many episodes of Law & Order and CSI. Our other hero, ladies and gentlemen? Anyway, it's amazing how quickly things can turn. I mean, we started this movie with some nice music and some solid camera work, and now we're in gratuitous jump cut and unlikable protagonist territory, and this movie is only 23 minutes in. It took this movie less than 20 minutes to lose me. I'd call that impressive, but if I remember right, I was ready to set my mom's werewolf on fire after maybe 10, So after the whole thing with the book tossed over the shoulder, we see the detective shove several of the dead shrink's files into his briefcase, because that's how that works. Chain of custody is this cop's middle name. Sadly, his first name is Wutz. After this wonderful display of police incompetence, we go back to Paul as he talks about his astral projections with the aforementioned Janice. Paul's a little concerned because he's having trouble remembering where he goes when he astral projects, and Janice tells him that he shouldn't worry about it. And then we cut to Paul's father-in-law playing chess with a friend at night on the front lawn, claiming he saw something that has him worried he's going senile. Then we jump to Jennifer in the kitchen going through Matthew's drawings of the Blue Man and looking concerned, and oh, for the love of Benji movies, stick with a scene long enough for it to actually have impact. For fuck's sake, the dog from Up is judging your lack of attention span. Morden Solus would tell you to take a breath. I feel like this is karmic punishment for yada-yadaing some of the earlier movies in the set so much. I now have a movie that yada-yadas itself. In the time it took me to write this paragraph, for instance, it goes from Paul and Janice to the on-duty detective telling a guy at the police station to find out who the most recent patient of the doctor was, while drinking beer no less, because I'm sure that's allowed in a police precinct, to Paul's father-in-law showing up at Paul's workplace. And we actually stay with this scene just long enough to actually build some interest as to why he's there, and then we cut to Jennifer in her basement. The movie isn't even half over yet, and it already feels like it's rushing. I'm honestly not sure I can condense this movie any more than it's condensing itself at this point. So, the kid, Matthew, starts acting creepy when his mom calls him out for messing up the dresser she was working on. Okay. Oh, and because I'm an idiot, I didn't catch right away that the scared-looking dude and the dog from earlier in the movie were Paul's father-in-law and the dog that ended up attacking him. Okay, that one's on me. So, father-in-law tells Paul all of this off-screen. We learn about it after the fact while Paul is talking to Janice. Paul has no recollection of this, so he's getting nervous about it, and Janice tells him maybe he should quit astral projecting. She asks him if he visited the dead doctor, and he says no, though he said earlier he didn't remember visiting his father-in-law at first, so the denial seems reflexive. With all this concern Janice is showing Paul, she's going to turn out to be evil, isn't she? This totally seems like that kind of movie. Oh, and around here is where even the soundtrack has turned on me. It has gone from rather soothing to repetitive and annoying. And while Paul is astral projecting again, I think it's well established at this point that he lost control of this ability around the time the movie opened. The Mill Creek watermark comes back. And the astral projection kills Paul's father-in-law. I think I'm going to stop calling it Paul's astral projection for now, just in case the movie tries to pull a twist ending on me. Oh, by the way, we go from the father-in-law being killed, to the cop going to the morgue to see father-in-law's body, to father-in-law's funeral, again, in less than a minute. The death scene itself was part of a longer scene. Well, longer by this movie's standards anyway. But still, I know I'm belaboring the point here, but watching this movie is like watching an internet reviewer's episode about a movie, but without the reviewer. Like, do any of you watch The Cinema Snob at all? Imagine watching an episode of The Cinema Snob, but with all the parts where Brad Jones is on camera cut out. And imagine that for 85 minutes! I actually wish My Mom's a Werewolf had been paced this fast, because then the stupid wouldn't have stuck around long enough for it to hurt. But after the funeral, we get a scene that, while still needlessly short, also shows the detective and his partner, assistant, whatever. We don't see the other guy outside the police station until the end of the movie. He dresses casual and he smokes in the office, so who even knows? Anyway, he finds the connection between the two dead bodies who the detective is investigating the deaths of. That the first was Paul's therapist and the second was his father-in-law. That's actually decent detective work there. And in less time than it took me to write that, the detective is at Paul's workplace. Now, I know that in fiction you need to time compress. You can't show an entire car trip from one place to another, for instance, unless you're Man House Hands of Fate. You need transitions, and you can allow the audience to fill in the blanks. But Eternal Evil overdoes it. The filmmakers here understand that jump cuts are a viable tool of filmmaking, but they don't seem to realize that there are other tools as well. Like establishing shots, for instance. This movie suffers from a lack of those. I have a theory that the director received complaints for one of his prior projects, whichever one it might be, that some scenes went on for too long, and in doing this one, he overcorrected and ended up going too far in the opposite direction. I mean, yeah, it shouldn't take too long for us to go from the detective finding the connection to going to talk to Paul, but I can't help but feel like we're missing something here. Like, say, Paul's reaction to finding out his father-in-law is dead? Maybe him worrying that his astral projection caused this? Something like that? But no. Between when Paul balks at the idea that his projection killed his doctor and the funeral sequence, we don't even see Paul. Well, not awake anyway. But yeah, the detective talking to Paul, which took less time in film than it took me to write the above paragraph. This scene, it's the word I want to use, stupid. I would bullet point everything about this scene that annoys me, from Paul not buttoning his shirt properly, to the detective ogling the secretary, to the detective being needlessly combative right up front, because, who needs build-up in a horror movie? But if I did that, I'd really be no better than CinemaSins at this point. Oh, are you one of the lucky few who has never heard of, or at least never seen an episode of CinemaSins? Well, let me save you the trouble and give you an example of what these people consider film criticism. I'd say the CinemaSins guys are worse than Armand White, but then again, Armand White was the guy who basically only gave Get Out a negative review in order to bring down its Rotten Tomatoes score, so... Where was I? Oh, right, stupid movie. Okay, speaking of stupid movies, turns out Paul's film, The Wandering Soul, was a documentary about Australian Aborigines. This movie's about to get racist, isn't it? While the detective watches parts of the movie, it is here at almost the halfway point of the movie we're being given another possible twist ending, i.e. this couple Paul talks to in his documentary, who claim to be people who've taken over people's bodies before. The man talks about how you have to break someone's mind before you can take over their body permanently. It's going to be either just the guy in the couple or both of them who are doing the killing, isn't it? Over 40 minutes of setting up either Paul's unconscious projection or Janice doing it on purpose as the murderer, and now the movie is just throwing it all out, isn't it? But yeah, this old guy is seriously talking about breaking someone's mind, separating them from everyone and everything they know and love, yada yada, and gee, Paul is not getting along with his wife and hates his job. This all could have been interesting. It really could have, but between introducing this idea so late, and the jumpy editing, and the detective being a douche nozzle, no matter how this movie ends, it's going to be stupid, I just know it. Spoiler alert, it is. Going back to the bad editing for a moment, during that sequence of the documentary within the movie that the detective was watching, the documentary part filled the entire screen. So when it jump cuts from Paul's voiceover in that aforementioned documentary saying, something like, by the time this movie was finished, the couple I talked to were both dead. Just more evidence for that non-twist ending I'm sure is coming up. It cuts from that to Janice in a dance studio suddenly coughing. It actually took me a moment to realize that it was the movie making the jump from these two are dead to some woman dancing, and not the documentary in the movie. And if that confused you, well, now you know how I felt watching it. After that brief scene, which probably just gave away the whole ending, i.e. the woman from the documentary, has already possessed Janice this whole time, and she's prepping Paul so her husband can take him over. Spoiler alert, I was partly right on that. We get Matthew being a little dick, and randomly pulling books off of his father's shelf while he's working at home. He gets frustrated and gets up and slaps the kid. Matthew's reaction to this? Nothing. I'm not even kidding. I can't even put a dull surprise. I can't even put the dull surprise clip in here, because that would actually be more than what actually happened. I mean, the kid's head moves in perfect time with the hit, so the actor's got that going for him at least, but that's really it. And then we go from that to the kid hearing voices in the middle of the night telling him to do something. The audience hears these voices too. Unfortunately, while this scene could have been effective, it's just a little too obvious that what both Matthew and the audience is hearing is someone whispering to him just off camera. That in itself isn't bad. It's certainly one way to coax a performance out of a child actor, but the framing of the shot and also the sound editing, it just makes it too obvious that that's what they're doing, and it breaks willing suspension of disbelief. Not that there was much of that left to begin with at this point, but still. And then we jump again to the detective talking to a college professor about astral projection. Oh, movie. Oh, bless your heart. You're going to try to science this. Oh, honey, no. You know, it didn't work with the Force and midichlorians. It is definitely not going to work here. Although, for the negative things one can say about Phantom Menace, it was certainly better than this movie. You know, I'm about to go on record with a controversial opinion here. I liked the pod race sequence. Fight me. Anyway, we go back to Paul briefly, but it's not anything important. So then we go back to the detective and a walking montage, and I am just so ready for this movie to end. Oh, and then we go back to Paul again. God, I swear that I am not jumping around that much more than the movie is. A little more, sure, but not that much. So yeah, we go back to Paul, having a meltdown while filming another commercial, and the detective happens to be there watching, because... So Paul calls his co-worker a homophobic slur and storms off the set. And the Mill Creek watermark is back again. I feel like I should be making a drinking game for this movie. For instance, take a drink every time when there's a musical sting that I'm pretty sure now is a didgeridoo. In this scene, for instance, it's when Paul sees the detective. You'd hear it twice in the scene earlier when Paul was talking to Janice on the bridge, among other places. Speaking of Janice, the detective, who, by the way, said nothing to Paul in the last scene, so why was he even there, picks the lock to get into Janice's dance studio after dark. Oh, he knows who Janice is, vaguely, because he got a picture of her at Paul's father-in-law's funeral. This begs the question, though. If she is a person of interest in the two mysterious deaths the detective is looking into, he could have at least tried to get a warrant. I mean, if he did and failed, that might have been an interesting sequence to have in the movie. Oh yeah, I just figured out why they didn't put that in. But yeah, Janice turns out to be there, and she's acting weird, and coughs up blood, and uses a Latin phrase that the old guy used in the documentary, and nailed it. Okay, so it was the old guy who took over Janice. I stand corrected. I said earlier it would have been his wife. Okie dokie then. Anyway, the coughing up blood suggests that something may be going wrong with the possession process. Or the old guy, just by sheer accident, happened to possess someone with tuberculosis. Who knows? So after that, we go and deal with Paul's boss's secretary being a jerk for no apparent reason. And then we go back to the kid, Matthew. Again, this movie jumps around so much. We go back to the kid, who I'm pretty sure the director told to be creepy in this scene, but probably should have been more specific. Anyway, Matthew goes down to the basement, where the whispering voice from earlier is telling him to drink paint thinner, or at least I think it's paint thinner, and, I'm sorry, watching this, I couldn't stop laughing at the scene, because the music, which is clearly intended to build tension for what's about to happen, you know, a child drinking poison, but oh God. Okay. I am going to try to approximate what it sounds like, what the music in this scene sounds like. And I know you're not going to believe me, but I swear this is how it sounded. Imagine that, but done seriously. So the kid drinks the poison, and the mom runs down the stairs, and she tries to Heimlich the kid, which I think only works for choking on something solid and not having drunk poison, but maybe I'm wrong about that, and even if I'm not, she's in a panic, so I guess I can let it go. And, oh yeah, the POV shot kills her in the same way it killed the shrink and the father-in-law. And then it jump cuts to the funeral. Oh, well, her funeral anyway. The kid is in the hospital. And the detective is there, acting like your archetypal cop on the edge. Which would be fine if we had any other cop on the edge type scenes, like the classic turn in your badge, you're off the case. But no. If you only read a thumbnail description of the cop in this movie, you wouldn't actually be missing that much. And now apparently the French secretary is killing people. Where the fuck did that come from? And why is the wee music back for a scene where it was a person killing another person and not an astral projection? And why are there still almost 20 minutes left in the movie? And as I'm sure you already deduced from what I was saying earlier, it's the old couple from the documentary. I probably would have tried to record this in such a way to make it less obvious that I already knew where everything was going while I was talking about it, but that would require me to care. And this movie doesn't really inspire that level of emotion. Anyway, we hear Janice and the French secretary talking to each other at the dance studio. So while the husband was in Janice's body, the wife was in the French secretary's. And because apparently the filmmakers had no confidence in the audience putting two and two together on their own, the scene with Janice and the French secretary is put right up against the detective rewatching that particular scene from the documentary. Just to really make that clear. So Paul figures this out when his son, convincingly acting sick to his credit, mentions the Blue Man. Not entirely sure how he made the connection between the Blue Man and Janice, because up to this point there's not been a single scene to establish that Paul had even seen his kid's drawings, let alone knew what Blue Man could possibly mean. I don't know, maybe there was a deleted scene where he saw his astral projection in a mirror and it was blue, and that was how he... I don't know, I'm giving this movie way too much credit. So he goes and gets the gun from the den, which we never actually saw up to this point. It was only mentioned, so I'm not sure if this counts as a Chekhov's gun. But he shows up at Janice's place at the same time the detective does, because why the fuck not? The cop pulls his own gun and tells Paul to get in his trunk. The trunk of a police... Okay, it's an unmarked police car, but still, Did you just forget your handcuffs there, detective? Whatever, we're in the climax now, so let's just get this over with. Paul gets the drop on the detective and manages to get his gun, so now he has two guns, of which he will only use one, because... He goes upstairs to kill Janice. Or I guess I should say William. The old couple I was talking about earlier, their names were William and Monica. Probably should have mentioned that at some point. Maybe. Anyway, the stupid music starts again, and it's still as funny as it was when it was playing over a child drinking paint thinner. I don't like what this movie is doing to me. Villain speech. The cop slowly walks in with a shotgun, and just fucking end. How can a movie this fast-paced feel this long? Violates the laws of physics. Anyway, the French secretary, who was Monica the whole time, almost gets the drop on the detective, who ends up shooting her in the stomach with his shotgun. William/Janice does not take well to this and starts screaming. She rushes the detective. Not fast enough for him to not have time to use the shotgun on her too, but that would be less dramatic, so he just stands there while Janice/William gets their hands around his throat so that Paul can shoot her in the head with his pistol. Good luck explaining this one to your superiors there, detective. Anyway, the detective falls over because So the next scene is at daytime, and we see a fully recovered Matthew riding a bike alongside Paul. So the guy from earlier, who was the detective's assistant, partner, whatever, shows up and talks to Paul, saying that after the detective got out of the hospital, he quit the force. This is all apparently a few months after the scene at the dance studio. So, who here is thinking that either William or Monica were somehow able to take over the detective? Why did I even bother phrasing that as a question? You all probably guessed that already. I mean, they did establish that they couldn't permanently take over someone with a healthy mind, and the cop was pretty obsessed with the case towards the end of the movie, so... But, yeah, I was totally right. And by me, I mean everyone was totally right, because you figured this out before I even said it. We cut to the detective in Japan now for some reason, and he's writing on a postcard. Can't really make out all of what it says due to the poor film transfer, but he signs it, Pleasant Dreams, Janice. And I think it was made out to Paul. The end. The credits list 2 editors, but much to my shock, given the film's constant jumping around, neither one was a meth-addicted rabbit. Stranger Things similarities. There's elements here with similarities to Stranger Things Season 2, but seeing as the set was made and was released before Season 2 is actually finished and released, I don't think I should count them. Final verdict. This isn't the worst movie in this set. It's not even the second worst movie in this set, but it is not a fun watch. It's too jumping to be boring, so in that respect it's better than Alien Contamination, but what goes on between the jumps is too stupid to care about. I mean, at least Alien Contamination made me laugh occasionally. Not intentionally, but still. The closest thing that Eternal Evil got to that was playing the silly, failed attempted spooky music over the kid drinking poison. That was it. I think the thing that aggravates me most about this movie is that it got me to turn on it so quickly. I mean, despite the film transfer issue, we did open pretty strong with decent music and good camera work, but then we just take a sharp right turn into Dumbassville so fast that it actually took me a few minutes to even register that the movie had gotten stupid. I've been let down by movies that opened promisingly only end up sucking later in, but I can't recall any other movie doing it to me that fast. And it was so predictable. As a rule, I try not to guess how a movie is going to end the first time I watch it, so for it to telegraph its punch so far in advance that I guessed the majority of the twists when there was still an hour left is not a good sign. Honestly, I don't think this is even worth a bad movie night viewing. This just plain sucks. The only reason I can say this set didn't end on a complete down note is that at the very least Eternal Evil isn't painfully bad like My Mom's a Werewolf, nor does it contain an out-of-nowhere and never properly addressed sexual assault like Warriors of the Wasteland. Well, now that that's out of the way, tune in next time when I do a Season 1 wrap-up video where I rank the movies of this set from best to My Mom's a Werewolf. Be honest, did you really expect me to put any other movie in the bottom spot? Anyway, at the end of the Season 1 wrap-up video, I will announce which Mill Creek cash-in set I have chosen for Shameless Cashgrab Season 2.